What's up, guys, and welcome back to the doctor's office. I am Dr. Crayory Knight, here to give you the proper diagnosis and prognosis and everything comics and comic book characters. And today, I have discovered a new book. And I am very, very excited to share with you. It's 2 issues in, and it's called Plastic, Death and Dolls. Or Dolls and Death. Whichever one just popped up just now. Anyway, so, of course, as y'all know, I love violence. If you've ever listened to me talk about horror movies or horror anime, I always pick the most violent ones. Saw, Freddy, Jason, Michael Myers, Chucky. Blood and gore is like my favorite thing ever. So, Scream is like my absolute 100% fave. It's real personal, you know what I'm saying? But anyway, that is besides the point. So, the cover of this, with him walking around with a hacksaw and someone's head in his hand, I was very, very interested in what was going on with this story and how this became the cover. And so, of course, in reading the story, I definitely got my answer very fast. So we opened the first book up with, we opened the first book up with a murder, right? There's a guy on the phone and he's talking about, it seems like he's talking about having assaulted someone, like a girl. That's what it sounds like. And so he was like, nobody saw me or saw what I did, and here I did. And, his head gets cut off. That's fun. Right? And then we just kind of go over to our main character, whose name is Edwyn. And Edwyn works in this diner, and he is friends with the diner's owner's son, who is blind. His name is Booker. And we very, very quickly find out over these 2 issues that Edwyn is crazy. But and it's a lot going on, really, but to be perfectly honest, it seems as if Edwyn doesn't like when people are bullied, and I would assume it's because he was bullied himself as a child. And so we go into kind of his background, where he was a child, and we get introduced to his mother, who also seems to be pretty much off of her fucking rocker. So that's the story that happens with the 2 of them and how we progress in his story later is very interesting. Now, in this first book, we see Edwyn, who, again, has befriended Booker, who is blind, and he's working one day, takes out the trash, and he sees this man kick a cat, and he does not like that. I don't like that either. But he really doesn't like it. And then we kind of get like a flashback into his childhood. Now, he did have a conversation with Booker when Booker asked him, I think, for a spoon or a fork, but he ended up giving him a spork, and he's like, I already told you sporks are superior. Well, he had kind of an obsession with sporks when he was younger. Now, when he did see this man kick this cat, and it triggers this memory going to where he actively beat the shit out of these boys at school because they were bullying, kicking, and essentially killed a bird. He brought the bird home with him. Now, the bird is very clearly dead inside of his lunchbox. They definitely killed the bird. But when he is brought home by like a teacher and they're talking to his mother, and she's about to like homeschool him because at this point he's been expelled. Again, he beat the shit out of them, and she makes a point of saying that you should see the other children because he has like a bruise or 2. He's got some blood on his face, but she was like, you should definitely see the other kids because he beat the fuck out of them. And he's been expelled. So she just tells him to go in the house. He goes to his little fort where he has sporks everywhere, and she comes in and she calmly is like talking to him and like, you know, what happened, and then he's like explaining himself, and she's like, well, you know, you're not going to be able to go back there anymore, you know, that's cool, but you do know that punishment comes. This cannot go unpunished. So punishment is what you're going to get. And he's very, very uneasy about said punishment. Now, nobody should be happy about getting punished, but if you were enduring the type of punishment that he was enduring, I feel like you would be anxious about it too. Now, what is this punishment, you may ask? Well, it doesn't really get to the punishment until the second book, but we flash back to the present. The man is in his work truck and he's talking on the phone, and there are these like little soldiers. Now, in before it switches back, he does say not the dolls, and when it switches back to the present, there are all these like mini figurines all posted up in this man's truck, and he's like very confused by this, it seems. So then he actually ends up getting his head cut off by Edwyn and placed in a baggie. Okay. So then we have going into the second book where people are talking about this psycho killer who is murdering people and cutting off their heads and taking their heads. So taking their heads and then like leaving the heads places as well. It's kind of weird. So we then get to the next book where we start off in his childhood, and his punishment is to be in this room with all of his mother's porcelain dolls. If you've seen porcelain dolls are very fucking creepy. My grandmother used to have several of them, as well as like those clown masks. Please. Anyway, so he is in the room with them. All of them are staring, they're creepy, but she doesn't turn it into like a traditional punishment. Like he has to help her like clean them and things like that, but she decides to kind of make it a little bit fun for him because she has so many, and lets him name them. Now, he of course comes up with the names based on the appearances, so like crazy eyes, cheeks, things like that. So he comes into this habit of naming things, which plays out later. So going back in, every time he goes into his apartment covered in blood and he has a head, he has a conversation with somebody. You can't really see it, but you can definitely tell that he's probably talking to his mother, just the mannerisms. And then we get into the second book where he is talking to his mother, only for you to realize that his mother is not actually alive. His mother has been dead for a pretty good while, and her head is in his fridge, and it just says mom scrolled across the top of her skull. And then he's like, you know, nobody could replace you or whatever, because apparently she's questioning why he's putting heads in her fridge. And the reason being is because when they're having the conversation about the serial killer and they see all of that stuff in the newspaper, Booker makes a suggestion as a joke where the person probably shouldn't leave the heads anywhere. He should keep them to himself so that he's not scaring the public. And then he makes a joke that Edwyn was probably the killer. Edwyn is definitely the killer, but you know, you're blind, you wouldn't know that. So he takes that advice because he is obviously quite fond of Booker, and he starts just keeping the heads in his house. Now, the reason that this even actually made the paper is because he left the guy who kicked the cat. He was like cat soccer, and so he cut his head off, put it in a bag, and wrote cat soccer on it. He's in the habit of naming things, and he doesn't like when people bully other people, or especially animals. He's crashing out over animals. Okay, so continuing on, we go back to the flashback memories, and his mom ends up getting a new boyfriend, something that he does not appear to like. And The guy even actually says it as Edwyn excuses himself to go outside. The guy's like, I don't really think that he likes me. She's like, well, he just met you. You just got here type thing. Like, he has to get used to you type shit, right? So he witnesses the guy talking about having sex with his mom. And she is obviously like, ugh, sex? What? She's against it because her son is in the house, which is understandable. And he's just like, we can do it. It's really not a big deal. He's gonna find out what sex is eventually, blah, blah, blah. All of the excuses that crazy people give to want to have sex with people just so that they can. Anyway, so he is very upset about that. And to be perfectly honest, I'm going to say that this guy is probably going to be his first actual kill. Now, I could always be wrong, and it actually be his mother's first kill, which prompts him to want to also join in on it because, one, it's something for them to bond over, and two, he has the hunger for wanting to do it for himself rather than having his mom do it and she possibly get in trouble and go away forever. Now, mind you, she also does die at some point in time, and he cuts her head off and has it in his fridge. So, who knows? We will see when more issues come out. I just think that it's very, very interesting. This is Image Comics, so they are good with the violence and the storytelling that comes with it. So getting into the mind of a serial killer through comic book, I think is interesting because everyone, like including myself, is always kind of like wondering the psychological aspect of it. How did you get from point A to point B? Like, what happened here to get you from here to here? You know what I'm saying? So I'm very interested in the rest of this story. The art, I think, is absolutely fabulous. So I'm very interested in the rest of the story. But that is it for this episode, and I will of course see you guys again for the next one, and when you guys come in for your next checkup.